you can have either a major recession or maybe even something far worse. And we're that leverage is going to grow. So I think the MOU is really quite a dramatic statement here that's bigger than even the surrender that's being discussed right now on the media, because I think people are just in shock, Lush. The idea that it's a shock. You see what I mean? We're trying to
Yeah.
come to grips with, are we really reading these words? And every time
Right.
you're a defender of Trump or you're a defender of the war, you keep saying, well, no, the words don't quite mean what they say. So who are you going to believe, me or your lying eyes? You see, that's basically the position to get in. And the problem is the words now are on the paper, and there's no daylight between the Trump signed version and the Iran signed version. And
Hmm.
this is what is going to determine the volatility going forward. This is going to be why the agreement could fall apart. War could start at any point here. You've got multiple ways this can now fall apart. We can talk about the different specific scenarios. And on my escalation trap Substack, I'm already writing posts about all this. You're reading them. There's going to be more because these scenarios. This is what we do. We're realists. I've been modeling the bombing of Iran for 20 years, so I've got a lot of background to be able to do this. Taught for the U.S. Air Force, all that stuff. So this is the kind of thing that we can do, is basically kind of near-term scenario analysis. This isn't long-term scenario analysis, what to expect in 20 years. And this is why the MOU has come as such a shock.
Professor, thank you very much for that, for the detailed analysis. This is a major earthquake, geopolitical earthquake, as far as I'm concerned. Such a radical change, an embarrassing change in many respects, from criticizing harshly JCPOA, Obama week. I'm not defending any politician here. Please don't misunderstand me. I'm just pointing out facts, how sort of genealogy of this entire thing shifted. JCPOA, and why did we do this? And we could have taken care of it by just bombing the country. None of it. So basically, the realist theory here is triumphing. We has triumphed. Basically, there are
That's exactly right,
yeah.
Lasha. So myself, you know, but your audience may not know that I'm a kind of an
For
unusual
us, this is a
bird.
big deal. Yeah. So, but yeah,
But I'm kind of an unusual bird because I'm on Newsmax,
yeah.
I'm on MS Now, I'm on CNN. Okay, tonight Newsmax was trying to get me on, but I've got to go give a big talk at the Chicago Council of Global Affairs. So this is not a situation where I am been quite privileged with, and this is one of the things I'm really just so. It gives me optimism, actually, that the way the Substack has unfolded is not in a political echo chamber. It's really quite stunning here. What is of interest to all of the different echo chambers, every single one that I can see, is this realist analysis. And realism is just not part of the Republican or Democratic Party. It's just independent of that. It is a power-based analysis. And that is why you get a better forecast of what's coming, because it's just the way the frameworks are developed. They have less influence by those ideologies, and you're less influenced to shade things to support one side or the other. And so it's just really striking to me that it's the very same questions that I'm getting on all these different, I'll call them echo chambers for lack of a better term. Fragmented media is a little nicer way to put it. And in fact, they're all facing the same sort of shock, which is this actually happening? You see? And what the real important thing to say is that this is a shock, but it's a predictable set of shocks.
Right.
These frameworks are not just developed, just in, real time in the last 5 seconds here or something. I've been working on these frameworks, the smart bomb trap. How did I get the name the escalation trap? It's because
Yes.
I had a half-done book called The Smart Bomb Trap, where I had all these cases of the smart bomb trap. So if you go to the escalation trap, you're going to say, oh my goodness gracious, how does he know all that? What's happening with Kosovo? And where is he getting all this? Well, this is coming from decades of working on these issues.
And your thesis on air bombardment not being able to fix the issue, right, is paramount in this. It's very
It's completely validated by this. I know that doesn't sound very, very humble, but President Trump went up against the weight of history with his strategy, and it was a strategy to use air power to collapse the Iran regime. That has no case in history going back to World War I of air power alone, want to be clear, air power
yeah.
alone succeeding. And even when you have air power and ground forces, you're talking about some pretty long wars. So this is not a situation where even with the ground forces, this is easy. Just put in 10,000 ground forces and oh yeah, man, you pop that regime down. No, this is a very different, he went up against the weight of history and he lost. He
Yes.
lost. History won here. This is another data point, Lasha. In fact, I wrote this book called Bombing to Win,
Yes.
and was published 30 years ago. I have written all these articles in Foreign Affairs since. Well, who do you think called me about a month ago to do a new edition of Bombing to Win? Cornell University Press is considering it, and I fingers crossed that they'll do it because it's kind of unusual that we
This is
don't have many books in my field that 30 years later they're that key paradigm book. So it's a big honor for me to even to have them consider it, and so fingers crossed here that
yes.
that goes
Of
forward.
course. Oh, yeah, yeah. No, it's no. This is unbelievable. I've said on numerous times. I've said that just to be on the safe side. Well, what I mean here is when you're dealing with Israel, when you're dealing with Bibi Netanyahu, this is still not quite over, right? That's the sort of a weak link, if you will, of sort of the realist logic here. 75, 85%, if it's if it has the explanatory power, especially in this case, I would say about 20, 25% there could be still some sort of
In the
blind spot,
realist
if you will.
paradigm, and I'm a realist, in the
Yeah,
realist paradigm, leaders don't have that much influence. It's the power dynamics that
sure.
matter the most. Now, that said, leaders obviously have influence. President Trump did not need to start this war. This was a war of choice, not a war of realist necessity. In fact, you've heard almost, I think, every realist say this was a bad idea from the get-go. And so this is it's
And
not
those
that
children would have been alive, by the way. Sorry to interrupt, but that tragic bombing of that school
oh
or whatever it was, those
yes,
kids would have.
all the
But
yeah,
that,
it's
yeah,
immoral and it's wasteful. It's not. There's no good that comes of that. I mean, this is not. No realist is really. This is the actual realists do not support stuff like that because behaving immorally is almost always a loser in realist frameworks here. It only makes everything much much worse. It doesn't get you out of it. When President Trump says I'm no more Mr. Nice Guy and he threatens to kill 92 million Iranians, that didn't exactly help him win the war, did it? So you have a situation here where the morality and the realists they often it's kind of ironic, Lasha, because before people know much about realism, I teach classes all the time. I've taught for the Air Force. They come in thinking, oh, realists must like love war, right? And they must be immoral, right? Well, and then you get into the realists and you discover that that's not true at all. And it's for this reason that I'm saying they're focused on the power dynamics, and the fact of the matter is the patterns of history are these things. Morality and power typically go hand in hand. They don't go and you often hear realists talk about having a velvet glove and being more moral. And this goes
yeah,
on, by the way, your listeners may not realize this. This goes all the way back to Thomas Hobbes, the
right.
first realist ever in the Leviathan, chapter 30. If you're just, I'm sorry to be a bit of a professor here, but
That's
a
fine.
lot of people will know chapter 13 of the state of nature of Hobbes. They haven't read chapter 30, where it turns out the Leviathan is handing out free public education.
since we're doing a little bit of name dropping here, I think
Yeah.
I think Hans Morgenthau, I mean, he had a strong moral aspect, moral argument within the realist
Yes.
thinking and philosophy.
Morgenthau,
He
strong
did not
moral.
discount it. He did include it there.
It's
So
in politics among nations, and he was extremely and publicly opposed to the Vietnam War on
yes,
the realist grounds. Big debates about this, and this was the war of the time in the 60s. So we have now the realists coming here. Well, Morgenthau was that person then, and he was strongly opposed, and he was right, it turned out. So he's not opposing it like when the war's over. He's doing it in real time, much the way we're commenting here and applying our frameworks now. And then it looks almost inevitable in hindsight. How could you go a different direction here? But that's where the power of domestic politics comes in. That's where leaders do throw things off. And that's taken into account. So the escalation trap frameworks that I've developed, and I really started to do this when I taught for the Air Force, they really try to directly engage with the power dynamics and politics as they intersect. So issues of political issues such as nationalism, regime cohesion, those are part of the framework now, much the way I think if someone like Morgenthau had been doing his work today, he probably would have evolved in similar ways. And so what you're seeing is the better realists, they don't just bracket politics and then forget about it.